Welcome to the City of St Catharines Development Charges Virtual Public Information Centre. The City is currently looking to introduce development charges and as such has undertaken an in-depth study which is now available for public review and feedback before it is presented at a public meeting of Council. In this 10-minute presentation, we will walk through the following information from the development charges background study. What are development charges and what is their purpose? How they are calculated, growth forecast summary and historic service standards, overview of draft local service policy, services, classes of service being considered for development charges, development fees, exemptions and grants, and next steps. Once you've finished this presentation, please take 5 minutes to complete the feedback survey at the bottom of this page. This feedback will be compiled in a report for Council. What are development charges? When new homes or businesses are built, it is referred to as growth. Growth brings with it the need for new infrastructure, as well as the expansion of programs and services for the new population, such as expansions to roads, water services, parks, and recreation facilities. Development charges are a fee charged when a building permit is issued by the city. Growth costs are recovered through this fee to build new infrastructure that supports the growth and to avoid taxpayers paying for costs that serve growth. Development charges apply to new buildings, expanded buildings, and converted buildings, change of use, in a number of categories: residential, commercial, institutional, and industrial. What is the purpose of development charges? Development charges are based on the principle that growth should be paid for by itself, not by existing taxpayers through property taxes, water, and wastewater bills. The purpose of development charges is to recover the capital costs associated with residential and non-residential growth within a municipality. Development charges do not pay for operating costs or infrastructure renewal. These will continue to be funded through existing reserves, property taxes, and water and wastewater rates. St Catharines is currently the only municipality in Niagara that does not have lower tier development charges. Overview of draft local service policy. Created in March 2021 as part of the development charges background study, the city's local service policy outlines what infrastructure developers are directly responsible for related to their specific development, and what infrastructure the city would be responsible for that benefits development throughout the city. The city's local service policy includes the requirements for services related to a highway, land acquisition for roads, waterworks, wastewater, land acquisition for water and wastewater works, stormworks and stormwater management, land acquisition for stormwater management facilities and erosion works, parkland development. How development charge rates are calculated. It is important to note that all municipalities in Ontario must follow the Development Charges Act, which outlines rules municipalities must follow for setting a development charge rate. The main focus of the development charge calculation is to recover the costs associated with additional infrastructure from the growth that requires the infrastructure. In simple terms, the rate is calculated as follows. The city does an in-depth study through the official plan, master plans, and the development charges background study into what increased services will be required to support projected growth. Capital projects are then identified to meet the increased service needs. Once the list of projects for the city is compiled, the total growth-related value is added up and then divided by the projected growth. Let's look at a simplistic example of how development charges are calculated. Say, as an example, we had 20 homes in St Catharines. All the infrastructure and services required for those homes is already in place and supported through property taxes. A developer wants to build 10 new homes, which brings with it the need to expand services which result in new costs. For example, new water and sewer pipes, expanded roads, an additional sports field, and a recreation centre to service the neighbourhood. These new costs equal $100,000. To calculate the development charge rate, we would divide the $100,000 by the 10 new homes to arrive at a development charge rate of $10,000 per unit. In order to receive a building permit, the developer would pay a development charge per unit to cover their share of growth-related costs as a one-time fee. Once built, the operation and upkeep is paid for through property taxes. Growth Forecast Summary and Historic Service Standards. The growth forecast is used for the following reasons: to assist in calculating the maximum costs that can be included in the development charge calculations based on the average of services that the city has provided over the past 10 years. To help determine the share of costs that should be attributed to residential and non-residential development, and as the dividing factor to calculate the development charge rate. The growth forecast summary is outlined in this table. Presently, development charges are calculated based on 10-year servicing needs for parks and recreation, library, transit, and growth studies. 21-year servicing needs for services related to a highway, fire and public works. 21-year urban servicing needs for water, wastewater, and stormwater. Services, classes of service. The services, classes of service, being considered for development charges are citywide services, services relating to a highway, fire protection services, transit services, parks and recreation services, library services. Urban services, stormwater services, wastewater services, and water services. Citywide classes of services, public works, for example roads, park and recreation vehicles, sand and salt storage facilities, works yards, and more. Growth studies, for example official plans, master plans, and the development charges study. Capital project costs. In light of forecasted growth, a list of capital projects and their costs has been compiled. As you can see in this table, this includes gross capital costs estimates of $200,136,200, with a total development charge recoverable cost of $58,594,716. Development rates. The proposed development charge rates for St. Catharines are as follows, and, as you can see from the table in this slide, are slightly less in rural areas. Residential. Single and semi-detached dwellings, $10,141 per unit. Other multiples, $7,439 per unit. Apartments, 2 bedrooms plus, $7,361 per unit. Apartments bachelor and 1 bedroom, $5,033 per unit. Special care / special dwelling units, $3,806 per unit. Non-residential, per square foot of gross floor area, $2.05. Per square meter, $22.01. Comparator rates. While the proposed development charge rates are what is required to fund the infrastructure identified to service growth, St. Catharines' rates would be the third lowest amongst comparable cities for residential development. They would also be the third lowest amongst industrial rates, as you can see from this slide. And, as you can see from this slide, the lowest rates for commercial development amongst comparable cities. Proposed grants. The proposed development charges include a number of grants, which are designed to incentivize the creation of affordable housing, brownfield remediation, expedite redevelopment, and encourage high-density housing in urban areas. The proposed grants include an industrial grant program, which would offset 100% of development charges for industrial use developments that can demonstrate the positive economic impact they will have in Niagara. An affordable housing development grant, which would provide a 100% grant to offset development charge costs for affordable housing units. Any units that are not affordable within a development would be subject to development charges. And an urban growth centre grant, which would provide a 100% grant to offset development charge costs for apartment buildings, apartment dwelling units, and long-term care units as defined under the city's zoning bylaw. Recommended policies. Under the recommended policies, St. Catharines development charges would include that demolition redevelopment credits would be available for 3 years from the date of demolition permit issuance and expire after 3 years. Brownfield redevelopment credits. Demolition credits would be extended by 5 years, expire 8 years from the demolition permit issuance. Transition policy for demolition credits. As a transitional measure, any demolition permit issued from January 1st, 2010 to December 31st, 2021 shall be treated as if the demolition permit was issued on January 1st, 2022 for the purpose of determining a demolition credit under the development charges bylaw. The recommendation is an effective date for the bylaw of January 3, 2022. Exemptions. There are a number of exemptions that are required under the Development Charges Act, including municipalities and local boards, boards of education, enlargement of existing dwellings, the creation of up to 2 additional units in existing residential single detached dwellings or 1 additional unit in any other type of residential dwelling, 1 ancillary unit in a new single, semi or row, industrial expansion up to 50% of GFA, university funded by senior levels of government. The proposed St. Catharines development charges also include a discretionary exemption for agricultural buildings. Next steps. The recommendations made as part of the development charges background study will be presented to Council at a public meeting planned for July 12th, and Council consideration of the bylaw is currently planned for September 13th, 2021. Now it's time to have your say on the introduction of development charges. Please take 5 minutes to complete the survey at the bottom of this page. Should you wish to read further, you can access the full development charges background study, which includes a breakdown of development charge rates, grants, policies, exemptions, and local service policy via a link to the PDF on this web page.